All right, so everybody, thank you for joining. This is sort of an intro to Dungeon Draft. My name is Jeff Todd. I operate Morvold Press, kind of as a side gig, basically making maps. And like yourselves, I have used other mapping software in the past. I have used Wonderdraft, which is sort of the sister software, if you will, made by Megasploot to Dungeon Draft. So Wonder Draft is more for top-down maps, whereas Dungeon Draft is more for building interiors. You can still do some, wilderness and whatnot, but I certainly probably wouldn't use it to make any kind of large-scale world map when I have something like Wonder Draft, which is, specifically created to do that. In the same way that Incarnate used to be mostly top-down world maps, I know they've released their battle maps stuff more recently, and a lot of it looks pretty decent. I have it, but I haven't played around too much in it because I guess, to be honest, Dungeon Draft is just too convenient for me to feel like switching away. So it sounds like most people who are here have not used it before, and have only seen maps of it. So if that's true, I think then just kind of giving you guys a quick tour of the facilities and how it works, and the workflow of it would be helpful. And then certainly if there's any questions, feel free to just shout out along the way. This is time that I want you guys to be able to have to ask your questions. So don't be shy. I think what happens a lot of the time is people try to get started and they just don't understand how to do one thing or another. They get hung up on one little tiny piece that frustrates them, and then they say, well, this is junk, I'm going to move on to something else. Or I already know how to use this other software that maybe isn't as good, but does what I want, and I know how to use it. So this is what, first of all, can everyone see the screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So this is what Dungeon Draft looks like when you come into it. Most people will start by clicking New. New will bring up the new map interface here. There are some templates where you can choose if you're making a map for, say, a 40-inch TV or A4 paper, A3 paper. I think I've only ever used A4 paper. Then you have a width and a height specification. And these are just grid tiles basically. So I almost always start with the 35 by 24. You can change it once you are inside of the program. So don't worry that if you make it too big or too small, you won't be able to make changes. So I'm just going to click OK. And when I do that, you'll see that it loads these some assets. I'll talk a little bit about how you can load additional assets. But then we get into an interface like this. You probably saw when I loaded in, I was kind of zoomed in. Down here in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see there's a space or middle button for panning. So if I hold down space and I move my cursor back and forth, you'll see it pans around the map. You also see control plus mouse wheel is zoom. So if I hold down control and click mouse wheel, I can zoom in and out. Those two, quick shortcut movements are very helpful toward doing really close work on your map and then seeing obviously how everything looks when you're up away from it. So those are two things to get used to very quickly. I will spend a second just also explaining this down the bar down here, because some of this will be one in particular will be very important to you guys and hangs a lot of people up when they first start trying to use Dungeon Draft. And that is, so you have grid, you can turn the grid on and off. So whether you want to have the grid or not, you don't have any control over how big the grid is. So you can't manipulate the grid lines up and down or back and forth. So if you're going to want to do that and place your own grid on it, you can turn the grid off and export your final map out of it without the grid on it, and then you can overlay a grid on it in Photoshop or whatever other software program you would want. Or I often will release ungridded maps for people in Roll20, and I do it for myself, and then I'll just import it into Roll20 and align the grid to the map in the way that I want to. The other thing that's very important is this button here called Snap. Snap, when it's on, I'll move my cursor and I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. As I move my cursor up and down, you'll see that it's basically, it snaps from vertex to vertex, right? It always goes to a cross section. I don't have any ability to come, like if we're in this little box that I'm making, I have no ability with snap on to go to the center of the box. It only lets me go to the outside. That's really handy for when I'm drawing a box or a circle or something where I want to make sure it's a very specific measurement, but I may want to place objects or place walls or have the ability to just freehand whatever I want. And that allows you to do that by just unclicking snap. So if I select snap, it's no longer clicked. And now you can see I can put my cursor anywhere on the screen. And I'll show some examples of snap on, snap off for doing various operations. Up here on the toolbar, menu has many things that most of you are, I'm sure, familiar with. Open recent documents, save. This is where you change the map size. So if I click on this, I can come here and say, oh, I started with 35 by 24, but I actually want to add 4 more tiles to the width. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 to each side and then click OK. And now I've got a 35 by 28 instead of 35 by 24. If I say, oh, you know what? No, that's not what I wanted to do. I can go back and subtract those away. And then we come back to our regular page. I didn't know about that feature for months. So I'm so glad I found it. Now, the one thing you want to be careful about is, and it warns you, you cannot undo a map size change. So please make a backup before you do it, just in case you push in minus instead of plus and you erase half your map. And then there's no way to get it back, because there is an undo and redo, but unfortunately undo won't work with map size changes. So just a future warning to people. Preferences, object tags, user folder, package custom assets. I'm probably not going to go too much into those. You can adjust like maximum level of undos, have it be automatic backups every so often. This was more prevalent or necessary earlier on in the beta of Dungeondraft, because it did crash quite frequently. Now I don't think I've had it crash on me for probably over a month, and I'm in it every day. So I think you probably have a good amount of wiggle room there. You don't have to worry so much about. But I haven't clicked on any of these 4 things for months, so I doubt as new users you will either. New is what we push when we start a new map. Open, obviously, when we open a new file or a new map we want to look at. Save, self-explanatory. I'll talk about export for a moment. So export, you have 3 different options. You can export as PNG, as JPEGs, or as universal VTT, which is a file type consumable by things like Foundry for online, virtual tabletop play. So you can put them out in all 3. If I'm going to be putting something out for people to use in like Roll20, I would say do it in JPEG, because the file size is going to be much smaller, and Roll20 free requires 5 megabytes or less, paid 10 megabytes or less, and so you're just going to get your more bang for your buck in terms of the amount of resolution. And then you can adjust things like brightness, focus, opacity when you export. You can also have pre-custom grid sets. So if you're doing Roll20, for example, it will go automatically. The default is 70 pixels. Now that's pretty low, but it maps up to Roll20's natural grid size. So when you make a map and you've got hallways and you've laid it out on a, say, 5x5 grid, it will be the 5x5 in Roll20. Now you can customize that in Roll20. So my preference is I put out a map in as high a resolution as possible that will allow it to bring in, so that people get the best quality they can. But that is kind of the basics of that. Undo and redo, I think, are probably pretty normal for most programs, and you would understand what they do. And then assets is, Dungeondraft comes with a stock of, I think they're up over 1,000 stock assets, meaning things I can bring in and drag and drop: bookcases, tables, chairs, whatever the case may be. But there are other packages out there that you can go and get in case you like other art better, or you want to just expand on areas that you use. These are 3 that I have just loaded right now, and I can show where those are located in the assets when we go through that. Let's see, any question about that top bar before I go into the sidebar and then we start doing some stuff?
When you were talking about the undo map size, is that like, you make it like you put part of your building on the edge of the map and then you shrink the map down?
Yeah, so I'll show you a real quick example.
That makes that disappear.
Yeah, so if we do, so I won't step by step this for you until later. But let's say I put something like this here. Yeah, if I go to a map and then I say change map size, and I want to add 2 more because I've put my building too close to the edge, so now I want to create more space, but I accidentally click minus instead of plus and then hit OK. It eats up that building, and you'll see that undo doesn't highlight, meaning it's not an undoable change. So now I've lost that. I'd have to redo it. Now, in this case, I didn't really do much, right? I only drew a building. But imagine you've just worked for an hour populating a map, and you just erased, like 4 grids of the entire map. So that's where you can get into trouble. So that's why, you want to be real careful when you're changing map size, as well as you can make a backup, and that helps too. Just don't save it right away is another recommendation that I would have. And it does do automatic updates and saves, so I would be just careful about using that. That's the only thing I would worry. But yes, that's what happens. It eats the map, and then you lose it. All right, so on the side, you have these various buttons. I'm going to go through what they are quickly, and then I'm going to start working through them and showing you how it works. So the first is building tool. Building tool is what you use to put down flooring, caves, doors, walls, what's called pattern shape tool, and I'll show you what that is, rooftops. So it's kind of your bread and butter of creating the thing that you're making, which is like these objects or these areas. It's very quick and easy, so I'll show some quick examples. So if I want to, for example, make a building, I have all kinds of floor options that I want. I can choose wood, stone, carpet, a different kind of stone, a cobblestone, some nice tile for like marble or tile floors, some straw, damaged wood. And then you'll notice that this wasn't inherent to me either, apparent, I should say, is below both the flooring and the walls, there's also a little bar, and that bar controls the color of the flooring. So you can change the flooring to, so for example, if I take the default, which is kind of like this, and I drew a box, so you'll notice as I'm holding down my left mouse button as I draw this box, and you'll see it kind of gives me the grid dimensions of what I'm drawing, so I can kind of take that into mind if I'm trying to make things specific to a certain size. If I let go, then it draws it with the wall and the flooring I've chosen. So in this case, the wall I've chosen is wood, the flooring I've chosen is this wood. And if I don't like that, the color, for example, then I can go down and I can change and say, no, I want really more like of a richer. This is like maybe a wealthy house, or I don't know, the type of wood in the area is this. So then I can come back and redo that. If I try and draw the same box, then it just replaces everything with it. Obviously, I can add on to this anywhere I want. So if I want to expand the building at all I have to do is just encompass that. With my mouse, and it will continue to draw that out. In this case, each of those mouse clicks that I just did is something I can undo. So if I click undo once, twice, 3 times, you can see it slowly moves me back through all of my choices and changes it back. You can make, circular objects. You can make a polygon tool to make, whatever object you're wanting. So the flooring is pretty easy to create. And then you can, so if we wanted a stone floor and maybe like a cobblestone style, like a tower or something of that nature, then I could choose those. And so now you have this stone floor and sort of cobblestoney exterior. And then if you want to say add walls to the interior, then I would choose the wall tool. And then I can say, do I want my walls to be over or under each other? I usually do under, so that everything I draw will be under whatever I've already drawn. And then you can choose which wall you want to be on the interior, because sometimes you might have a stone exterior, but you want a wood wall interior. But in this case, let's do wood and wood. So now you'll notice I've got snap on. So it's making me go vertex to vertex, which is very helpful when I'm doing something that's, blockish like this, right? A rectangle with all right angles and everything, if I want to do it that way. So then I could draw a wall here and say, okay, these are going to be like a hallway, and this is I'm going to make some rooms. So I've kind of got a room, and a big long hallway. And now I can, go around. Now I could come down here and say I want to add some doors, and these are all portals, because these are doors and windows. So there's a couple things I can do. One is anchored means it will be in the wall, like it will only put the portal that I've chosen, which is this door, in a given wall object. If I click unanchored, it will let me put the door wherever I want, and also to rotate it around. But in this case, I almost always use anchored. And then block light, we'll see lighting later, but block light lets you decide if the object should block light or not. So if I put a door here and a window next to it, but I want the window to allow light in, then I'll click allow light for the window, and then I can go back and click block light again as I continue. And now I'll go over light later, but just to show you how it works, if I pick lighting and then come here, you can see that the lighting will not go through the door, but will go through the window. Cave brush is another popular tool. So this is very easy. Let me get rid of some of this other stuff up here first. And this is very important too. You can also erase as easy as you can create by simply pressing Alt. So let me get rid of everything that I've got here, except for the walls, obviously, that I've made. I have to select the walls and actually get them gone by hand. So I'm clicking on them and then just hitting delete. And I do that with the select tool, and we'll go over that here in just a minute. But let's say I go back and I want to show you how how getting rid of it works. So here I draw a big rectangle. Let's say, oh, you know what, this is too big, or I want there to be kind of a thing coming in here. If I just hit Alt, you'll see if you look at the cursor, the little circle, right now it's yellow. Yellow is create, blue is replace or remove. So if I have it yellow and I expand it and I draw a box like a 5x5 box, it's only going to create more onto the area that I did not have it in already. However, if I draw that same 5x5 box while highlighting it, while holding Alt down, you can see it's blue. And when I let go of that, sometimes I let go too early, then it will remove it. So this is a very easy way for you to shave down the sides of your buildings, or for you to add, kind of be free with how you're adding stuff to the building, and not be, oh, I made a mistake, I made this too long, rather than go to undo and then redo it. You could just say Alt and just take out that piece. And that can be very helpful. The other neat thing is you can, like, if I take circle as a tool, that allows me to make some neat shapes out of my buildings. So if I want like a curved entrance or like a garden, or I don't know, something I want to create a look and feel of my building that is more, I don't know, akin to the architecture I think would exist in this area. And it's all very circular, then maybe I would pick that or use that. And I can carve that out and make, these little alcoves or make these areas, which I find to be very helpful. Same with the multi-tool. If there's a very specific shape that I want to make, now this is a part where I would say I want to use snap off instead of snap on. So snap on means it'll take me vertex to vertex. So as I draw, it only allows me, to take these big one grid jumps if I want to draw something and like omit it, right? So I could hold Alt down while I'm making this, and then that will take out the piece that I just made. However, turning snap off will let me kind of move wherever I want. So now I could just draw whatever shape I want in the middle of this building, and it will remove that shape. So snap is very useful to turn on and off for different reasons. And I'll continue to highlight what those reasons are. But in this case, when I'm drawing or omitting or removing pieces of a building, then I use snap on or off to make it easier or harder, easier for me. I never make it harder for me, to make it easier for me to be able to build what I'm looking to build. All right, so I will get rid of all this. I will try. There we go. So Cave Tool, basically Cave Tool also has, basically, as you can see, I can use my mouse wheel to go up and down, or I can select the size that I want to make here. And this is a suit you can make, an interior cave for one of your adventures in 10 seconds, right? So you basically just hold the mouse button down, draw your cave, draw a tunnel here, draw a tunnel here. Oh, I want to link these up. Oh, it's going to have another tunnel back here. And I don't know, the boss is going to have some big cave back here I want them to fight, and he's going to have like a little escape that goes out here or something. So, in 10 seconds, I've made some cave system. Oh, and we need an entry. So maybe this links up, and then it goes out here, and then this, I don't know, goes into something. Actually, you know what? Let's not do that. Let's erase that part. But this is going to go out into something. So, here I've drawn this cave tool. I can adjust. I can change the color. So on the color, you'll see there's a plus. The plus means add another preset. So right now it comes with only one preset, but let's say I say, you know what, I'm going to make caves a bunch. So I really like this color, this darker color of floor. So I'm going to accept that. And now it's going to be there as a preset for me to use anytime I want to. Same with the wall color. I want to have my wall color to be, a little darker. So I'll do that, and that's going to be a preset there for me now. So now whenever I draw caves, if I want to add on to this or make a new room, it's all going to be following that same color convention. So you'll see here there's dig cave and blast open. Blast open is something that I use for a couple of reasons. One is, let's say that out here, and I'm going to come to this brush later, but I'm going to do it quickly just so that we can highlight the point. So let's say I've got some, like this is, there's a cliff or there's grass or a forest, and that's where people get to this cave. So if I go to my cave tool and I've got some forest that I've made out here or some grass that I've made, I can hit blast open, and then I can come and select the area. And basically this removes the part of the cavern, including like the walls. So it lets me have like more of a natural opening. So that people can just, players like looking at this can just like walk into the cave rather than it being this sort of awkward wall that we have to pretend isn't there. So I can click the blast open in the same way that I can hit Alt and click over areas that I've blasted open to close them. So that's also possible. Another reason why you might want to use blast open is on the interior of your caves. So for example, I'll show one thing on the next thing down, which is the terrain. So you've already seen me draw like some grass. You have 4 terrain options in Dungeondraft that layer on top of each other. So I can have, some grass over here. If I want some different colors of green, I could pick like say moss and put some moss on top of the grass. To make it just look a little different. Obviously, I'm not being very, very careful. I could pick some gravel and put some rocks in here, so on and so forth. Now, you'll notice that none of these options, I'm clicking in the middle of this cavern, none of these options work inside the cavern, right? If I take the grass and I'm holding the mouse button down, I literally just draw it up into the cavern. You'll notice as I enter the cavern, it just sort of disappears and no longer draws. So, and that is because Dungeondraft uses a layered system. So what I mean by that is if I go to something that uses layers like objects, so I go to an object tool, you'll see here is the list of the layer hierarchy. So it starts at terrain, and then above terrain is below the ground, above below ground is caves, then a flooring, then below water, then 1 through 4 of layers. We'll talk a little bit about why layers are important. Then portals like doors, walls, above walls, roofs, above roofs. So here in this case, because terrain is below caves, it won't show through, right? Caves takes precedence. Caves will block terrain, which is generally what you want because the cave is on top of the ground. You think about if there's snow out there or something and you got a cave, well, snow isn't in the cave or grass isn't in the cave. But sometimes you want to represent a like I don't know, you have like a druid cave or something, or you've got a lot of growth happening inside a cave and you have some water, for example, and you want to represent that. Blast open in the cave option is one of the ways that you can do that. So I can come in here, for example, and blast open this whole section of inner cave. And then that allows me to use the terrain inside the cave. So then I can come back with the terrain and maybe I, don't want, maybe I want grass, right? I'll get rid of everything first. So I'm just using dirt because that's the base terrain. So I can just erase that. But inside the cave now, then I can say, all right, well, I guess I do want that to be like some grass because I want this to be kind of like a druid cave or something. So you'll see there's a nice kind of border. If I think it goes too far, I can go back to my cave brush. I can stay on blast open, but I can hit the Alt button and I can draw back over where I want it to stop. Right, I can erase the blast open that I made. So now it's a little bit smaller. And in this case, which is also nice, is I can go and grab water. We'll talk about the water brush here in a second. But in this case, I'm just going to grab a certain size and I'll drag it around, and this will create some water. So now I've got some water inside my cave, which you can do. You can draw water in cave, but you'll notice there's a difference in its appearance because the cave is beneath the water. And one of the reasons why I might want the water to be not under cave floor is there are some nice textures and some cool looking things you can accomplish by placing terrain underneath water. For example, gravel underneath water gives it a very cool ripply effect and makes it look like just natural rocks kind of living underwater. So it's very easy to create kind of this neat kind of textured look. And if that's too much, I can go back and select dirt and then come over here and just kind of click once, in a handful of places, and it will start to kind of clear away the terrain. And that's how you kind of layer terrain on top of itself. But you can see here where the cave floor still is, even though I'm pressing the terrain button of the rocks, it doesn't complete it. So you can see the difference between the water that has terrain under it and the water that doesn't, and how you may want to have this effect inside your cave rather than this effect. Okay. So that's just a nuanced thing that, and somewhat new, that I discovered maybe, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. Which is really helpful if you want to have snow in a cave, or you want to represent like swampish or like necrotic or some kind of flavor in a cave outside of the only thing generally you have that you can control, which is the color of the cave floor. Any questions on caves, cave floor, that kind of stuff before I move on to the next thing?
No, it's all
Okay.
fascinating.
Perfect. So I'll erase this. So hitting Alt button, I can just I'll go back off. I did cave. You have to. These are separate options. So if I hit Alt and start erasing, it will only erase the blast open parts, not the cave. But if I switch to dig cave and hit Alt and start erasing, it will then erase all the cave stuff that I've made. And you'll see as I erase the cave, you'll begin to see all of the terrain that I was actually drawing, because Dungeondraft does do it, even though your hierarchy is covering it, the layers are covering it, it still makes it. So as you can see, so then if I go to terrain and I go back to dirt and I just click and highlight over all this, I can erase it. You'll see it takes a little while to undo. Now you have this intensity button over here. And if I do that all the way over and I click, you'll see it gets rid of it much faster, because this is kind of like you're telling Dungeondraft, I know what I want to put down. I want to put down a bunch of dirt or grass or whatever, and I want it to do it fast, right? I want it to not waste time putting my stuff down. Versus if you do less intensity, that's how you can do better blending. So if I want to put some of this green on top of this regular grass, if I do, I'll show you first without it. If I do it at high intensity, if I start pushing my mouse button, you'll see how fast it spreads out. It's hard for me to get kind of like a creep or a sporadic spread. It kind of takes over in these large chunks very quickly. But if I undo all that and I use a low intensity, then if I start clicking my mouse, you'll see it starts coming in much slower, and I can kind of control the spread a little bit more. So I can make it a little more like, I don't know, artistic the way I might want it to be. If I want the green just to be intermittent throughout all of the terrain, I can use that intensity to make it easier for me to create the image or the picture or the feel that I'm going for. Maybe it's hills with sporadic parts of grass cropping up here or there. Maybe the darker green is where I'm going to put trees, or the lighter green is where I'm going to put trees or something, and it lets me make those kinds of determinations. Also, if I'm making a path, I may want to have some control over making rocks in this environment a little slower, so it doesn't draw them all thick in, because maybe I'm making a forest path that's overgrown, and so I don't want it to be super thick. And I can always come back in with it and just kind of like go over it with that. Now, I have found if you're blending colors together, it starts to get a little hard to see the rocks in the same way, or if I have a mono color. So if I've got just like moss, for example, and start putting the rocks over that, generally, I think there's still a little bit of grass or some other thing that's coming in there. Maybe it's the intensity. Yeah, okay. So the intensity is also governing to some degree how thick it's coming in and how visible it is. But you'll see as I'm trying to like thin it out, when I have the high intensity, it takes huge chunks away right away. Versus if I turn my intensity down and click over it, you'll notice it starts taking away a lot easier, smaller section of the stone. So this would be ideal for me if I'm trying to like make a path through the woods and I'm trying to make it look, overgrown. Like it's you can see the rocks, but the grass is prevalent and it's moving over. So this is like a faded path or like a natural trail, a walked path rather than a paved path. Versus if I had high intensity and I drug this through, then this looks more like a road. Right, something that is frequently traveled, so on and so forth. So let me return all that to what we had before. And then for the same water, we'll go over water here in a second, but I'm going to get rid of the water just by hitting Alt and erasing it that way. I could, if I put it back, I could also just pick a select tool like the circle, and then just circle and make a circle, a spherical or ovoid bit of water. And I could also use Alt and just erase all of it. So even if I draw in something kind of crazy like this, I don't have to spend my time Alt, erasing all of it. I could just take the circle tool and just say, whoops, and just say, get rid of all of it. Water, you'll see, has two colors. The lower color is going to be what color the water appears like first. So if I pick this blue color and then draw some, that'll be the color that you see. The second color is the color that you see on the interior as it deepens, to show that this is deep water. So for example, if I wanted this to be dark, right, this is the outer water is shallow, so it's lighter. And then as it gets deeper, it gets darker. I might pick like that color. And so then as I continue to draw, then you'll see that at the periphery, it remains that light blue color, but then it gets deeper as it gets darker as it goes into it. And you can select the blend distance of the water, right? So if you want the shallower part to be further in, and the deeper part to have to be more water for it to be deep, then you can just change the blend distance, to almost nothing and have the deep water start almost immediately. So if you're doing like a coastline that where the continent tapers off or something of that nature gradually, then you might have a higher blend distance, so that it looks like you've got a little bit of land before it starts getting deeper. So that's just some nuanced stuff about water, but water in general is pretty easy. You draw how you want. So you can draw, you can do your initial drawing however you want. It's very free and open and easy to do. And then if I want, I could later come in and say, all right, I'm gonna change the shape a little bit. I'm gonna kind of carve away some of the exterior and make it more into what I want. Maybe I want something like this shape, or that's too much like normal, so I want to carve out some little areas or something. So it's very easy for you to add, subtract, make changes, do whatever it is you want. And for if you wanted to build like some land or something, I can take away a little area here, and now this can be an island, and you could go into your terrain brush, for example, and say I want to pick some sand, and we're going to put like sand around the edge of the island or something, and we'll put some greenery in the middle of the island and let it kind of blend out to the sides like that, and maybe touch that up a little bit. You can see the sand underneath the water as it spreads out and looks a little bit different. And then maybe we put some rocks on top of that, on both the water and on the sand and the island, right? Now this is kind of getting crazy, but again, I can zoom in, I can narrow my scope down, I can start clicking on the sand to kind of break up the rock so that's not like so concentrated, in the same way that I could clean up and expand kind of the greenery till I'm happy with how it looks, and then whenever I'm happy and good with how things are, then I can just leave it alone, or whatever the case may be. And I can draw on the rest of the rocks if I want the rocks to live out here as well. And I always like adding some texture, because you'll see you get this inside of Dungeondraft, you get this real nice like watery, ripply effect, which is always just very visually pleasing to me. But that's an easy way that you can make like a little island. Now I'm going to show another thing you can do on so cave or the building tools. We kind of went over making flooring and making walls. We went over making walls interior, or just wherever you want. I mean, I could draw a wall literally just wherever I want right now, and it'll draw that for me, even though it's nonsensical and I wouldn't do that. You can put portals wherever you want, but if it's anchored, it'll go only in walls you've drawn. You can make the caves. Pattern shape tool, I will probably get into this later, but this lets you make flooring options, but in a placeable by you, and you can control the layer, which is important. So on buildings, I can't control the layer because it is a set layer. The building is flooring, and floor is a specific layer that you cannot manipulate. However, pattern shape tool gives you a lot of the same flooring options, like a hay, like a ground. So if I wanted to make like stables or something, I could kind of get like a dirtier like color of that, and use the Omni tool and say I want there to be that flooring over here. And so it makes that color. I can draw any shape that I want. And then I can make this go on top of other objects. I can make it go below other objects. And that can be helpful to me in a variety of places. But it's good to just know that it's there. I probably didn't use this tool for months and months when I started. I just didn't need it. But as I got a little crazier and started to try different things, it became a useful tool to me. Roof are brand new. They just got put in, I would say like less than a month ago, probably less than 3 weeks ago. And basically you have two options. You can do a quick box where you just draw a box or a shape, and it will draw roofs, which is super handy. So for example, if I was making like a village or a system of alleyways or something, I could, say I want, this is all going to be like dirt paths. And then I'm going to have like some pathways that, running through my buildings, and maybe it's next to this lake. Okay. And then I could, put some grass around that. So here's my little tiny town next to this lake that has my, nice greenery around it. And I'll just kind of complete some of this. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and put all this in here first. I like to layer as I think it would have originally grown, because then I think it's more natural. So for example, before these houses were here, it would have just been grass, probably. So if I were making a map, I would probably put down that stuff first. If I'm making something like rooftops and things of that nature, if I put down a building, I usually do the building first, and then I worry about terrain later. But then I could come back in here afterwards and then say, okay, and now I want to designate where do I think like walking paths are. So maybe this guy's front door is here and it comes out, and this guy's front door is here and it comes out, and there's a main like road that comes through town and curves around and comes this way and then like goes on its way out of town. Now this is since I'm doing a road and I don't want to have to wait for it to. This is a thing where I might use the intensity so that I don't have to wait as long holding my mouse cursor down for it to draw that. And so then if I go back over it, you'll see it kind of draws it in more thickly. And maybe I have my road coming out and leaving town here, something like that. And then I can turn my intensity back down because maybe now I want to say, okay, this guy's door is here and this person's door is here. And they're going to have maybe like a path off to the lake or something. And then they'll have another path that cuts in from the road. So there we have, some little paths and some little rooftops. So this was very handy from the aspect of I want to make a town scene, but it's not important really what's in the buildings because I don't think the players are going to go in the buildings. I just want to be able to quickly create an alleyway or quickly create a part of a city or a market or whatever that I can have because it's really ultimately all the action's going to take place outside. They're going to be running around through these alleyways, and that's what I want to use. So that's the rooftops. It's super handy. I'm really glad they added it. I'm actually, this won't really make any sense to you guys now, but as you use it, it might. I also was really happy that they put in roofs because it adds another level that you can make objects be roof level or above roof level. So it gives you even more layers to work with. And I'll kind of talk about layers here pretty shortly to why they're important. So that's terrain brush. I think you've seen a decent amount. To see all the terrains, you can highlight the white box, a little grid, and this will show all the terrains that you have access to. So there's cracked earth, dirt, dry grass, gravel, which is what I use for like roads, limestone, moss, rocky terrain, which is more of a darker stone. It's not actually, that's not it. There we go. And then sand, which we've seen, sandstone, snow, swamp, void. And then this is actually rocks is from a group or a asset, customized assets. It's from one of these caves and spiders or reefs and jaws. So it's actually an asset someone else made that you can use inside of Dungeondraft. Water brush, I think too, probably you've got a pretty good idea of. You get the square, the round, the omni tool, and then the different brush shapes to be able to draw your water. I use the omni tool because when you draw the water with the tools, I think you'll notice that it kind of makes some sharp cuts that may not be aesthetically what you're looking for. So a lot of times I'll use the omni tool after I've drawn my water and then simply go around like the shape I've made with the omni tool, maybe just a little bit outside of what I've drawn, kind of like this. I'll try to go fast and it won't be as good as if I took my time, but I think you can kind of get an idea. Obviously, if I went a little slower, it will be smoother, but then you end up with like a much, curvier lake or river or whatever the case is, if that matches with your vision. So that's a way you can smooth out the edges with the Omni tool. Or if you really are like, well, I don't know, for whatever reason, I want some river running in between, these houses, and I just want it to be there. I don't know. There's some troughs. It's magic. It's coming out of a storm drain. I don't know what you want, but the tool might just be not ideal. That's the smallest you can get, and trying to draw it through here can sometimes get annoying because maybe it doesn't draw the way you want. So it gives you just some extra capabilities. The next brush you have is the materials brush. Materials brush can be really useful. It is controlled by layers, so you can move the materials beneath each other as well as other objects. So, for example, if I picked above walls but below rooftops, if I chose, say, this acid, and I clicked in the middle of the roof that I've already placed and the ground, you'll see that it only shows the acid underneath the building and then hides the acid because the roof takes priority due to the hierarchy. But if I said, no, I want my acid to be on the rooftops showing, and I re-clicked here, you'll see that the material goes now above the roof. So you have acid, you have like a kind of a walkway, like a street. I see a lot of people use, I don't, but as much, but I see a lot of people using this as like a street. Very easy to just kind of make this. I would say in a city, right? This might be a better choice for making like streets very quickly. There's gold. So if you have like, I don't know, a dragon's hoard or something and you want to create a bunch of gold, you can do that. This all works with the alt as well, so I can erase it as quickly as I made it. One small thing that I had to learn when I was trying to erase it and suddenly couldn't, I would be doing stuff like this, where I forgot what level I was on, and say I originally had picked level 3 and made some stone, and then went back to it like later after I reloaded the map and wanted to erase it, and I would do alt and start clicking, and I'm clicking right now and nothing's happening, and that's because I'm trying to erase layer 1 stone. There is no layer 1 stone, there's only layer 3 stone, so I have to go to layer 3, and now when I hit click alt and press, you can see that it gets rid of the stone. So that's, unfortunately, there's nothing, I can't click on the stone with my select tool, I can't highlight it somehow or have it tell me that it's layer 3. So unfortunately, you just have to kind of be good about remembering what level it is, or you just have to do trial and error until you get what you want. There's a couple of different grasses, so you can kind of quickly go around and say, oh, I want there to be some grass around this house, or maybe around the edge of the lake. I personally don't tend to use a lot of these grass options, just because I'm not. A lot of people would say Dungeondraft has somewhat of a cartoony feel, which I actually enjoy the aesthetic. But I do feel there's some assets that reinforce that cartoony feel of it, and I feel like these two grass options are one of them. So I don't often use the grass options. I will instead default to assets of bushes and grass to accomplish the same thing. There is an ice, so if we wanted our lake to be iced over, I can just add some ice on top of it and do that. There is, however, no Omni tool for materials, which I don't like. Because then you sometimes have to either make your lake the size of the ice you've drawn, or you have to just be careful and be okay with there being some overlap or some ice not drawn exactly perfectly over the lake you've made. Then there's obviously, what can you have? If you have ice, you have to have fire. And then this one being like a stone tool. And the nice thing about these is for stone, for example, I can draw all this at layer 3. If I click on layer 4, then I can draw some more stone, and that will draw it on top of itself. So this is kind of a cool way of making a tiered, rock system or something like that, if I wanted to do it that way. That's one way that you can make cliffs and make rocks and make obvious elevation changes. There are some inherent, not flaws, but limitations to doing it this way. For example, I can't layer terrain on top of it now. So that limits so it will only look like the stone, and I would have to rely entirely on object placement to add greenery and add other things. And I'll show the other way here in just a moment. So we can get rid of all that. And then obviously I made that one on layer 3, so I have to go back to layer 3 to get rid of it. And then you'll see I had this one selected, so even though I'm going over these areas with Alt pressed down, it will only get rid of the one that I have selected if I'm going over that. And I can zoom out to do this a little faster.
If you've got the rocky thing that you just made with more layers, is there a way to make like an incline from one level to the next?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. So the way I would do that, let me actually, you know what? Let me just I'm just gonna start a new map. Okay. So the way that I like to do elevation is so right below material brush, which is conveniently the next thing on this list, is path tool. Path tool lets you draw a variety of cool things like blood trails, chains, cliff face, log fences, train tracks for like mines or carts, ropes, shadows, which I'll show, stairs. This is super handy for making like curved stairs. Now you kind of see how jerky it is. You might say, oh man, it's so hard to draw a smooth stair. That is indicative that you have snap selected. So if you unselect snap and now draw, then you can see that it should go much smoother for making those turns. Obviously like crappy looking walkways. these are some of the extra assets that I have that are not part of core Dungeon Draft, so I won't get into those. But let me get rid of these. So one that I use a lot is this cliff tool. So under these, let me quickly go over the interface for tools in general. So you have layers again, so I can designate layers for my layers, which are for my path tools, which is very important, and we'll see in a moment. I can choose whether they're over or under each other. And so, for example, if I draw a like cliff edge here, if I have over, then anything I draw will go over that. If I go under, then anything I draw will go under anything at that same level. And that's very useful for the hierarchy of these objects as you place them down, and I'll show you kind of why. Then there's smoothness, there's width. Smoothness will actually, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't used, I think it's maybe more for, let me see, stuff like the, I'm not exactly sure which one the smoothness, well, none of those seems to be too much difference whether it's smooth or not. So I guess I almost never mess with smoothness, but I will mess with the width of it. And I'll show you kind of a couple tricks I use for creating kind of forced perspective. So if I go back, oh, I wanted to undo. Okay. So let's go back to the cliff face. So the cliff face, depending on which way you drag, this one, for example, will make this top be like the higher elevation and this bottom be the lower elevation. If you have it like over each other, now this is all layer one, but if I have it over, then I can take another one and put it kind of over this one, which then starts to look a little bit like it's on top of each other. You can give like a little gap, for example, and that kind of can start to also give an impression of height. And then you can use the terrain to come in and I don't know, we could do sand, right? Then you can kind of fill in some sand. Maybe it's sandy up here, but down below it's rocky or something, right? So that's an easy way that you can kind of like show this height difference. And it's a little hard with the way it's drawn here, but let me back out a little bit, and let's do something slightly different. So if I pick so we can stay with sand. I always use. So let's put some sand down. I just want to make sure we have enough. So then I might go here and take the path tool and then do something like this. So now I can kind of make, say, okay, I've got this thing. And then when I go back, oh, you gotta go this way. Oh, that's still not the right way. Yeah, okay. So that is how I would do, like, here's a way up onto this thing. You then have a transition in and transition out. So a lot of times when I'm drawing these, I will draw like basically where I want all of my walls to be first, or my elevation to be, and then end it just a little bit before I would want it to end for sure. And then I would decide, do I want it to just like sort of disappear, where I could say I want it to fade when it starts and fade when it ends. And then when I draw more, it will kind of like disappear, right? The more I click, and you kind of lose track of where it was here, and it kind of like looks like it's just fading into the sand. So that's one way. You want to make sure you're going the same direction, of course, so that it doesn't look weird. But that's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is you can pick fade and on transitioning in, whichever way you're drawing, and then shrinking on the way out. So if this is the right direction for drawing, then you'll see it kind of like looks like it tapers off. And then I'd want to do it the opposite this way, because I have to draw this way. So in this case, then I want it to actually grow and shrink. So there then you can have like, the little on-ramp onto your area. The nice thing about this is it lets you keep all of the terrain colors and everything on top of it. And then I can layer these walls on top of each other. So if I choose path tool again, and now if I increase this, maybe, I don't know, 0.15, if I take off of, and let's take off grow and fade. We're just going to like layer it on top. I'll worry about blending it later. But then if I come on top of this, now I can keep kind of just along this edge and start drawing multiple layers and go up maybe, 0.35 or 0.2 larger each time I kind of go up. So the wall becomes like a little bit bigger as it gets closer to the audience, which is us. So now it starts to look like, a raised wall. which I think is really cool. You can then also have some cool things. This will show another feature of building tools, wall tools. You'll notice that there's on some of them there's an edit points. This is super helpful. I'm gonna back up a step, if you'll forgive me, and go back to building tools. So let's go back to building, you know, like a building here. Let's say I've got something like this, and this isn't exactly what I want. I want this corner to actually be out here or something of that nature. I could redraw it with the tool, or I could go to click edit points. And then you'll see as I move over the wall, you'll see all of the points on the wall, and I can click on a given point and then move it and just put it where I want it. And in this way, I can make all kinds of wonky shapes, and I can make a building kind of exactly the way I want it. Or if I drew it and it's wrong, right, then I can bring it all back in and say, oh, no, I didn't mean to go that far. But I don't have to worry about it. I can use edit points later and fix it. Edit points also works with path tools. So if I were to go to path tool and edit points, then from here, like for example, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, you know what, I kind of want there to be like a cave here, but I've got this too forward. So I really want to have happen. And you can create new points. So I can click anywhere on the line and it will create a new point that I can manipulate. Now I'm on snap. So I want to turn that off because I want to do fine tune control, right? And so now what I want to do is I'm going to move these back. I want to move that line back kind of away from the rest. So I have kind of like this gap. And then I might want to actually, okay, so that's that one. It's a little confusing sometimes to know which layer you're working on. So now I've got this little kind of a circular area, which could easily be like a cave facing. And so that is when I would then come and use this shade tool, the shadow tool. I'm going to change, this is all layer 1 right now. So to be, if I drew the shade over it, it's going to go over everything. Okay. And that's not what I want. What I want is to be underneath all of these. And to be underneath it, it has to be on a layer beneath layer 1, because that's what I use to draw it. Now I have 2 ways I could change this. One is I could just use the select tool, go select the wall, and then you'll see one of the variables is the layer. So I could say I want it to be layer 2. Oh, well, doing that, because the other walls were all layer 1, now puts it over those. So I'll have to go and change all of my wall layers. But if I don't want to do that, then I can go back to my path tool, to the shadow, and I can say, well, let's put this below water. Even though we don't have any water, that's okay. That just means it will be beneath all of these rocks, okay? So I can click like that and put some shadow. That might not be quite wide enough, so let's widen it up a little bit, and then go back over it again. So that looks, you know, pretty good. Now I have 2 options. I want to make this darker, which means I basically have to draw some more over it. I have 2 options. I can keep trying to draw it by hand, but you'll notice that when I draw it by hand, I have to be careful. Otherwise, if I don't, I start getting this weird crossed effect, where when it overlaps, it gets darker, but where I miss, it stays lighter. And so it's very obvious that I was doing some drawing. So one way is to be very careful when you draw. Another way is to draw your initial line. And then once you're done, go to the select tool, select the line of the shadow you made, hit, you know, Control C on Windows to copy it, paste it. And now I can just move, whoop, I didn't want to rotate it. Now I can just move the whole shadow in line and actually, you know, and it should be exactly like the one I just drew. So now I can just, you know, keep pasting it and keep putting it, you know, over itself. I guess I missed one of the areas of where one should be here. There we go. And now I can keep pasting and keep putting into the new area so that it keeps getting dark, you know, in the appropriate place where it's dark, and doesn't, you know, create any of those weird lines. So now I have something like that. Now I would want to put some terrain underneath it, you know, to start giving it that, you know, that darker effect or whatnot. I probably would make this a little larger. If you want, you could come through with a path tool, use fade, and then you could like draw, whoops, we want to use this. We want to make sure it's also on a layer above these, so over layer 1. And then if you wanted to, and we're going to reduce the size just a little bit. Then you could come through here too, and you could like come over, you know, it to create more of the look of the cave. If you felt like, well, there's too much shadow showing, it doesn't make sense visually, you could carve out some of that cave, or you could leave it the way that you want. But that's a way that I could put something like that onto the map, so that this would lead potentially into another map, for example. Any questions on that, on the elevation? Now, I guess to answer your question, before I answer additional questions, now I could go to this stone and I could, then do like something like this. And then do something like this. And then these are layer 1, layer 2. So then if I wanted to, I could go to a path tool, have this be layer 2. And then, I don't know, have something, where there's some kind of path, like up on, whoops, I'd have to draw it backwards here, up onto this thing. But it starts to get a little wonky, excuse me, with the pathing tools and the material brush. In this case, this would make me want to use potentially some kind of asset like rubble or something in here to mask the obvious break between the terrain and the raised rock, if I wanted this to be considered to be like an even flow. And we haven't even really got to objects yet, so that's something to be aware of. But you can do it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that should work.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions about like path tools, layering things, using the material brush, just generically?
So there isn't like a blast out option for that kind of thing?
No, there's no blast out, like where I could like, let's say I don't want this section to be here anymore, because I now have decided I'm going to put something through here. You basically have one option for that. You can do what I did, where if you want to change the tool, the course of it itself, like you can move it, right? You can move it around. So that's one way. Or you could choose an object that would go over it to, say, indicate that there's a way up and down, for example. So if I went to an object, so some way I might want to do that would be, I'll go in here and I'll go and pick like a tree, like a big tree or something. And so then if I put if the tree is above the other layers, right, I could do something like this to indicate that you can get on the tree down here on the forest, and then the tree actually goes up the side of the wall, and now you're, if you follow this up here, you'll get there. If I did this, then I would also probably want to come down to the path tool and pick. So this is where layering gets important. So these are I think layer 1. I made this tree layer 2, so it would be over above it. That's probably fine, but I might want to make this layer 3 if I want anything else to go underneath the tree but over the rock, like plants or other things, or if I want to draw like a shadow. In this case, I might want to draw a shadow beneath the tree, especially like when it's above the rock. So maybe here it's flush with the rock, so there wouldn't be a lot of shadow, but like down below or something, like, maybe like down this way, I want there to look like there's, to indicate some height. I'm doing kind of a poor job of that right now, but that's something you could do to give an impression that there's distance here between the rock and the ground, something like that. But yeah, there's certain things where it's kludgy in the way that you can kind of overcome certain things like that, but there isn't a blast out option for cliffs. Any other questions about the pathing tools? You can experiment with them. I use, for example, like the grow and shrink or whatever, like for chains. So like if I want to show distance, right, I might want the oh, we have a chat question maybe. Yeah, this will be recorded and posted at a later date for everybody to go back through. So I think actually here maybe the smoothness. Let's try that. Whoa, I got a little crazy. Okay, so maybe that's where the smoothness is going to come in. I don't know. I can't tell. So I would use like the for like chains. Like this would be if I want a drawbridge or something, and I want this to, like, perspective wise, this is going to be higher than this. This is going to be lower to the ground. This will be higher up. I may even like do sections of the chain. So I might do like, change the width. So start with a big chain and like, slowly kind of maybe make something small like that, and then like decrease the width a little bit or something, and then like link it up and keep it going. Well, I'd have to go the other direction, looks like. Something like, that. And link those up to force perspective and say, this is tall and we're close to it, and this is far away and lower to it. I did something like that on a castle map, and I can bring that up just so you can see what that looks like. So this is a finished map that I made of a castle that I based off a real castle called Castle Harlech in Wales. And there's a lot going on here, as you can see. But this is an example where it, you can't tell as well, but the chain tapers off as it reaches this block, and then gets a little bigger as it goes up. And then, like, for example, I layered multiple assets together to make this look like a wheel that would turn and collect the chain. And then I used grow and shrink on the path tool of the chain to make it look like it's kind of wrapping around the tool. So if I were going to recreate that effect, for example, here in this map, first I would pick something to wrap the chain around. So let's just pick this log. And then if I picked the path tool and the chain, I would pick grow and shrink and probably lower the width a little bit. And then if we want to show that there's like some chain wrapping around it, obviously we also have to be over. One nuanced effect. Let me see, because I think this is layer 2. Yeah. So one thing, I don't know why. It's probably for a good reason that I just am not privy to. But if the path tools like chains, blood trails, cliffs, even if they're the same layer, and even if you say above, will not go above an object. So a layer 2 chain, even if I have layer 2 also, but over, will not go over a layer 2 object. So when you're building, and again, this might be more complex than you guys need at this point, but it's something I have to keep track of when I'm making things, is to make things the proper layer so I won't run into issues later. So for example, if I thought, oh, well, no problem, I'll make the tree layer 2, and then I'll come in with a layer 2 chain later to put over it. I'll just click over. That won't work. I'll have to make the tree like layer 1 if I want to make the chain layer 2. But you have a lot of layers to use, so it's fine. We'll make it layer 3, so it'll go over it. So now here, I have it on grow and shrink. So as I move it across, now it'll shrink and grow, so it kind of makes it look like it's wrapping around the tree. And if I wanted to go down a little bit more, I think we'd probably get a little bit, better of a visualization of that. So you can kind of create those kind of effects by manipulating this grow and shrink, and layering them on top of objects to create kind of what you want. Okay, so we should probably get into objects. So for that, let's do a new map. And let's make a building real quick, just that we can populate. So here we have a building. We'll say this is, I don't know, we'll make it like a tavern, okay? We'll make some walls. So let's say this is the common area of the tavern. Oh, I don't want battlements though, I want wood. So let's say this is gonna be a little bit bigger. This will be our common area. Let's say we have a hallway. That's gonna go, I don't know, out here. Actually, let's erase that. Let's go make a hallway go like this, and then like this, and like so. And then let's say I'm gonna have this will be a kitchen or something, some storage. This will be maybe just some rooms. This will be like maybe a side meeting room or something that people can have. And then let's just say these are all going to be rentable rooms. So that's kind of one of my process when I'm making a building is I draw the outside first and get the shape I want. Once I have the shape I want, then I go to the interior walls and start carving out specific spaces and kind of deciding what all lives here. What's going to be the flow like for something coming in? Where's the front entrance? Where's the back entrance if they have one? Where are the bathrooms if they have one? So we're in a tavern. Obviously, taverns should have bathrooms. So let's say we're going to have a bathroom here. So I'll wall that off just to remind myself I wanted to put the bathroom here. So then I would come in maybe with the doors and say, all right, well, the front of our tavern should have a big, double door. So I'll put a double door there. That's bothering me because it's not even. So let's redraw that. So that's better. Another thing that I like to do, and this is sort of something people don't realize, there's a thing called smart stone. If I draw a smart stone in a straight line, it makes this really cool, like closely coupled brick looking thing that looks like a road or a tight hallway. If I draw it 2 by 2, then it makes more or less this squares, like more like a dungeon tile. I like to use the single row smart stone for hallways, just because, for a couple of reasons. One, I think it looks really cool. Two, in a building, this is more of an aesthetic design choice. In a building, I find it useful to mix the flooring types, even if it wouldn't architecturally make sense. We're not, most of us are not architects that are playing D&D. But our eyes are, and our eyes want to break things up and are much quicker to understand something if it's like color coded. We can understand at least that this room has a different job, or this room has a different feel to it. So if I can give the hallway a different feel than the main rooms, I can instantly tell what's hallway in this building and what's not, like in a half a second by just looking at it. And I find that to be really useful. I'll show you I'll go back to the straight wood. So if you just looked at this, from a distance, if you looked at this right away, it might not be apparent where the hallways are right away, especially if there were multiple hallways and this wasn't so clear cut. But you'll see if I make that change again, it's immediately apparent where my hallway is. And I prefer that to as like a DM or even a player. It helps me understand. It's more aesthetically pleasing to me. And then another thing is I might change, I might change this to stone for like the kitchen. And I might change, this is called sewer tile, but I just like that it's different. I might change that to be, say, the storeroom for additional goods from the kitchen. Okay, and then I might put on some doors. So interior doors, don't need to be as fancy. So I'll have a door to the hallway. I'll have a door to, say, in the kitchen. Maybe it's like a little double door. I'll put it on the side. They've got a door going into the storeroom. I'll put that here. Off the hallway, we've got maybe a room here. This room can be accessed here. And then we've got some ways into our various rooms there. Maybe for the bathroom, it'll just be a plain like wooden door, not one of these regular fancy doors. And then this one, I think we said was going to be a fancy kind of like meeting room off the side. So then I put in my doors. They're all blocking light. Now I switch that off and maybe go to windows. I have a whole bunch of windows options. I have shutters, closed, open, screens. They just added all of these, which is really cool. But you could just choose this super generic window and then just add some windows onto your building, which you'll see in just a little bit why that's really nice and important to have those on there. And let's see, we don't need one in our storeroom, but definitely we do in the kitchen because that generates a lot of heat. And then we'll put a door, let's say, going outside. So we got a door leading out of the tavern in the back. So now we've got we have our building, we have our hallways, we have our rooms kind of set for what they're going to be. We've got all our portals ready, and now we want to put down some assets. So we move to this button, which is the objects tab, and we have two options here: the object tool, the scatter tool. I almost never use the scatter tool, but I'll show you what it does. So if I click on the scatter tool and I click on books, I have options of scale, rotation, and spread. Basically what this lets me do is if I'm putting down like bushes or something where there's going to be a lot of them and I just kind of want them to randomly be put around, then I click my left mouse button down and I just start moving my mouse around and it starts dropping off the object in a scatter pattern. If I increase the spread, you'll see increase the spread value, it increases the amount of distance I have to travel before it puts down another object of that same type. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. No, it doesn't. It increases the distance between each object. So I'm holding down my mouse button, but because I think I'm too close to a given object, it will only drop stuff when it's certain length away. If I then decrease that to hardly anything, then it will just let me put down all kinds of stuff, which can be useful for grass or other objects of that nature. Okay, but we don't want to do that. We're just going to put down objects. So I click on object tool and I get out this custom, this interface. I can choose the layer of the object, and that will be very important. I can choose over and under, which is awesome because that gives me effectively two options on every layer. So I have a huge amount of variability. I can rotate the objects this way. So let's say, let's pick this map. So I can use my mouse button, which is what I use to rotate stuff, but I could also rotate it here if I want to. I just like I can kind of see what it's doing here when I rotate it. Scale, right? You can move it up and down. You can also, I think, use Alt up and down. Yep, Alt up and down will also adjust the scale, but I'm so used to just using it over here, you'll see me do that. There's shadow, shadow will put a shadow beneath the object. So I use shadow for big objects that would potentially cast one, right? So like a desk or a table. Actually, most furniture in general will have a shadow. So like if I have a bed, I will put a shadow on the bed, which is nice because I don't know, it adds a little bit of something to that texturally. But if I put a carpet down underneath the bed, so I'll go to a carpet, and then obviously I'm on layer 1, it's on over. So if I wanted to put it on the same layer but be under, I'd have to choose under, and then you'll see that the carpet will go underneath the bed. So that's how you kind of layer objects. So if I did layer 2, no matter, even if I was still on under, it's going to be over any object 1 layer item that's out here. The reason that gets important, and I'll pause for a moment just to explain that, is it's easy to kind of get in trouble when you don't build, when you add things you didn't think you were going to add in the first place. So for example, let's say I put down like a table. So I put down my table, and then I want to put down some chairs around the table. So I put in this case, it's working for like, if I forget to put it on under. So here I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good, right? I want the chairs to look like they're pushed in underneath the table. So I click under, same layer. This is a layer 2 table, layer 2 chair. But now I can kind of like place the chairs around the table and make it look like they're all pushed in. So that looks real nice. And then maybe I want to also put a carpet underneath here. So I'll again choose under, but it's layer 2. I'll choose under, and then I also want to put I'll put over, still layer 2, because I want to put a tablecloth on here. I'll make it a different color. Put a tablecloth on the table. All right, so that works, and that's cool. And now I'm gonna choose some plates to put onto the table. Again, still layer 2. We'll just put that, and I'll turn shadow off because they probably don't leave big shadows. So we'll turn the scale down. I'll put it over layer 2, so it's over that. So great. All right, bang, 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 looking good. This is all great. Okay, so I got plates. They're on a tablecloth. They're on my table, which are on the chairs, which are on the big carpet. That's all awesome. Now, if I decide, you know what, I really want a carpet on top of that carpet to kind of give me a different look or feel. So if I go and pick the carpet again, and now I want this color carpet to basically be on top, in between the carpet on the bottom and the stairs. Well, okay, that's over, so that must be a problem. So I'll just click under. Oh, that's under everything, right? I've used 2 as the layer for every object in this whole thing. Now, because I built it incrementally and I had an idea of how I wanted to build it, and I can also just move these if I select the select tool, and you can just click an object and move it if you don't like where it's at. So that's another thing. If you notice that it's being weird, like, oh, I can't get it where I want it, chances are you have snap selected. So just unselect snap and you can move it where you want. All right, back to the actual problem. So I've made everything in the layer 2. So that's a problem. I have a couple options. One, I can start over. I don't want to do that. 2, I can come here and select this and say, all right, I'm in trouble. All this is layer 2. This is layer 2. I really need this to be layer 1. All right, I kick the carpet down a layer. And now when I choose this, I also make this layer 1. And now I say, I want that to be over anything else that's layer 1, but it will be under anything that's layer 2. And now it'll let me put the carpet in between my other assets that are layer 2 and layer 1. Now, this is a lot of talk about layers. Why is that important? Well, how often am I really going to use layers? Well, depending on how complex you get and how nuanced you want to be with the asset placement, a lot. I use it all the time to create new objects. So I'm going to show an example of that because this also comes up a lot, which is Dungeondraft doesn't have a well. Well, it has wells now, but let me show you the well that it has. And this was a newer ad, so it didn't have a well for a while, and I actually have to search for it because I don't actually use. So I can search. You can also, there's a box under here. I can type in well. Okay, so here's the 2 wells. It gives me a closed well and an open well, and those are my 2 options. Okay, that's fine. That doesn't look too bad, but maybe I want it to look nicer, right? I want there to be, there should be the posts and the wooden rod going across it, and a rope and a bucket and a handle. Like there's things that go along with that I want to put in there. So how do I do that? So what I would do, right, is I go find some base that I want to use, and I commonly use the stone circular base, this guy. So I'll go and grab that, and I'll pick him at layer 1 for now. So I'll put him on there. Then I'll go back and find the actual well, and since that worked well, I'll choose that. I'll size this down because I want this to live like inside. I want it to kind of look like that's the bottom of the well, and then there's like some, I don't know, area in the middle, and this is the top of the well. I don't know. I feel like I like the look of that better. Now I'm going to get a little fancy here. So I'm actually going to change this layer to, so what I'm doing is, even though I put layer 1, all that's important is that these are in order now. It doesn't remember that this was layer 1 on top and layer 1 on bottom. It just means that this object is on top of this object. I can select all of those objects, and I can now change the layer of all of those objects and say I want all of that to be below water. And I'm doing that because I want to put some water on top of where this water is to have that neat water effect. So I'm not going to draw it in that color. I'm going to make a circle. You get to an edge of a circle of where you want, and then basically draw to the other edge, and that's where you'd start your circle, and then just draw that over. So now I have water underneath that. And then one thing that you can kind of do, which I found is kind of neat, I'll search for my wells again. I'll get this guy. I'll make him also below water, but above. So it's going to be over my other two things that I've made that are below water. And then I'll put that there. And then that, starts to kind of look like the bottom of the well, right? So I've finished that. Now I've got the base. I've got the base of my well, the top of my well. I've got kind of like the in the well. Now I want to make the other stuff. So to make the other stuff, I'll switch up a layer. Maybe layer 1, layer 2. So now I will go and find some things to make my posts. I frequently use these guys. I'm just going to grab check chat real quick. No problem. Thanks for coming. Okay, so I will then grab this and I'll put those on like either side. I will go and find the post, some kind of, I got like kind of a long rod here. I'll make that bigger. Now that's a little thick for my tastes. So I'm going to change paste that down just a bit. So I'll put that down just a little bit more. All right, that's fine. So then we'll put something like this. And then maybe, just to represent the crank, it's going to be fast. I will put something on here like, let's make it something like this, and then like that, something like this. And then I will grab another little asset here, something like that. And this will kind of look like the rope tied around it, make it a little bigger. Okay, and then we just kind of like drag a few of these. And then I will go and find, let's see, do I have a bucket? I think, yeah. So we got a bucket. That's a big bucket. We'll size that down. All right, so that's a little small bucket. There we go. And then and that's layer 2. Now I may want to say, you know what? I'm going to put a path tool on this, so I might want to make that layer 3. In fact, let's maybe make that layer 4. And this will show you the importance of the layers. So now, because I want this rope to be over almost everything except for the bucket, or except for the bucket. So then I can choose layer 3, choose rope, increase the width a little bit. That looks like a little bit too big, so we'll go down a little bit. And now I can kind of go from the bucket, out. Now I'll coil a little bit, maybe to make it look like it's limp, up to that, and then bring that up to and stop just before it, so it looks like it's kind of directly connected. So now I have a little crank on the rod, and I have the rope going to the bucket. So now I feel like this well looks better than just the standard well I get out in Dungeondraft, and that is how I create a bunch of the sort of customized assets that I use when I make the maps, because I just think about what do I need, what pieces do I need to make the thing that I'm making, and that's very helpful to me to have that ability to layer the objects on top of each other. I'll show another example. Now, I'll show one more thing. I hit the select tool. I can highlight everything I just made. Now, the only thing that won't work with this is the water, but that's fine because you can redraw the water. It will remember all of its layering levels. So I can move this. I can size this down, because if I made it and it's too big, right? Or maybe I needed to make it so it was big because I had some fine-tune work to do, but it's really going to be more like this size when it's done. So now I've got that. I'd have to redraw my water around it, but I've got it. I can rotate it. I can, make it big. I can copy it. I can paste it, right? So one thing I do a lot of is I might keep these objects in a separate Dungeondraft file, just the objects, and then go and open up that if I need them and go and grab like a well I've done before, copy that, paste that into my new map, and just put that somewhere. There's another way you can do that. So if I highlight this and I hit Control Copy, then I go and go to something like Word. So let me open up a new document here. If I paste that, you'll notice that it pastes all this code. Okay. If I highlight all this code and I copy that, then go to back to Dungeondraft and let's open a new. Let me launch Dungeondraft again. So I'm opening up a new Dungeondraft, hitting a new map. And now if I go to the select tool and hit Control V paste, it will paste that asset just from that code. So if I want to, I can copy out, once I've made like my own asset, I can copy that, paste that into any word, processing program, delineate it somehow, right? Label it so I know what it is. And then I can copy and paste that anytime I want to and bring that into a new map. So that can be a way that I can create my own asset pool of stuff that I've made. So I don't have to recreate the well every time I want to make a well the way I like to make them. Does that process make sense to everybody? Any questions about that?
Can
Yeah.
you
Sorry, yeah, I was just gonna say you had mentioned custom assets before and how you got them from other places. Is
Yeah.
that something that is different, and you would save your custom assets differently?
Yes. So if you're gonna get custom assets, the way that I do it is you have a assets button up here at the top. You click on that. This would originally look like blank. You would have a browse button to select your assets folder. So if you don't have one, you'd click that. That would take you to basically go find a place to have your custom assets. Basically just telling Dungeondraft, where should I look for your custom assets that you have? So then in this case, mine are in documents and Dungeondraft. So if I go to documents and then go to Dungeondraft custom assets, that's where it would be. It's asking me select what folder. I would select that folder. Then if we go to, let's see, caves and spiders. Oops. That's what I wanted to go to. So if I go to that pack, so we have, you just had documents, Dungeondraft custom assets. This is where, so when I got that list from this guy, I went and bought this package from this person's website. It came as this caves and spiders.dungeondraft_pack file, which you'll see as a type is a Dungeondraft pack file. Then I put that file into the folder that I have designated as where Dungeondraft should look for custom assets. Once I put those in there and reload Dungeondraft, then they will show up. They will be unchecked, but then you check them and you'll hit accept, and it will say this. It will say, you modified the selection of custom packs for this map. Please save and then reopen it for it to know what they all are. And then when you go to your assets, it will put them last. So even though alphabetically, some of those assets will be called things that are before assets that come in default Dungeondraft. Default Dungeondraft, all their assets will come first. And the last Dungeondraft asset is like a bunch of boats. So we'll scroll down until we see the bunch of boats. So here's the bunch of boats. And then this is where the beginning of the first asset pack I have, which is caves and spiders, will start. So it's got like these bats and little spiders and eggs and crystals and other things like that. And then there's another package that has like some colorable objects of regular Dungeondraft, including trees, which is hugely useful because default Dungeondraft only comes with green trees. But some of anything that is colored, well, they changed it. So unfortunately now you just have to look and see what color you have highlighted. But anything that has that color, you can change the color of the asset. So in this case, I've got the tree. So I can if I want to make like a fall, smattering of trees, I can go and grab, something like that. And I can start adding the color to the trees. Whereas in default Dungeondraft, all the trees are the same color green, which is hard to have any kind of like variety. I guess that's not true. You have pink trees and orange trees, but those are your 3 color options versus the asset pack that has a colorable object. The as you can see, if I change it to like bright yellow, you'll start to see over here several of the assets that I can control the color of. Some are, unfortunately, because of the yellow I've chosen, a little misleading. Like I can't change the color of a candelabra or a candle, but I can change the color of like this cloth. And so if I put that down, I can click on the cloth, I can open the color, I can say I want that to be blue, or I can click on it, I can say I want to choose a color, and it gives me this big color spectrum wheel or color spectrum, and I can say I want to be red, and I want to be dark red. And then any object I place, I can click on it. You'll see this bounding box create. I can shrink, enlarge or shrink it. I can move my cursor outside of the blue box, and you'll see the little hand for a moment. And if you click while the hand is on, I can rotate it. And I can also just grab it and move it. And obviously it will maintain its hierarchy. So I put this down as above, layer 1 above. And so it will be above any other layer 1 thing that I make. Does that help with the asset, that process?
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
the pathway assets or the extra assets are kind of the same deal.
Yeah. So I have some extra pathways. So for example, with the sharks and reefs or whatever, like this is one, I think this is actually webbing, but I found that like underwater, this looks a lot like reefs. Actually, I'd have to select this, change it to underwater, and then use the water brush and just cover it up. So one thing I always recommend to people who are using the software is just because something is called something doesn't mean it has to be that. You can use it for whatever you want. So don't be afraid to just go find an asset that looks like what you need and then just use it. And then just don't be afraid to mix assets to make what you want. So for example, I had like this letter, and I said, oh, I want this to be like an official looking document. So I went and got this guy. This guy's called a bottle, but I don't care. It looks like what I want. I wanted like a stamp. So I size it what I want. I take off the shadow. I change it to like, I don't know, red for like, wax or something like that. And then I put it in the bottom. Right. And now I've got, I don't know, a stamped letter. Right. So I don't really care what things are called. I just look at the shapes, look at whether they're colorable or not or whatever, and then just kind of stack them in a way that makes the thing that I want, if that makes sense. So let's see. So you can select a bunch of assets all together like such and move this around or rotate that. So once you've kind of made them, if you're like, oh, I want this over here instead, because that makes more sense because the kitchen's over here or something of that nature, then you can do that. I think, it's getting to be a little bit late. I want to show one more thing for sure, and I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. And that's lighting. So lighting is this little 4 little star icon. You have 2 options, environment and light tool. Environment will let you affect the ambient light of the map. Mostly people, I think, will use this for like day night. So you can change the RGB until you have like a lighter and darker version. You can also add like colors. So like if I don't know if it's like a forest or something and you want to add a slight green tint to everything, you can do that as well. I don't mess around with that as much. So that's one aspect. And I use this as a check after I've placed my lights to make sure I've got coverage everywhere I want it. Excuse me. So then the light tool is what you would put on your light sources. For example, let's put a candelabra, a candle holder just here on the table. Maybe 2 of them. We'll put 2 of them. Okay. And then let's also put, let's go down here and let's put a lantern, or let's put some torches. We'll make them a little bit bigger. That's really big. Let's make them a little smaller. We'll put some torches on either side of this wall and then either side of this wall. Okay. Now, under the light tool, you have 3 options. You have this fragments light. I don't ever use this. I'm not really sure when I would. I have point lights, which I use all the time. And I use soft light, which I use all the time. Point light, and you have color choices. So you can color the lights any way you want. So point light, I find really useful for 2 things. One, if I want to highlight a source of light, like this is the thing that's lit, it will put a bigger focus on the actual flame point, for example. So if I'm lighting this, I could just take this soft light, expand, like I can control the range, I can control the intensity, so I can make it very faint, I can make it extremely bright. But I might want just a balance there. So I could just take this and say, all right, it's on the torch, and I'll put a couple of objects here. If I go to my select tool, it'll actually show you everywhere you've put your light. Light is an actual object. So we'll undo that quickly here. But if I go back, right, I can put a light here, put a light here, and put a light here, and that looks fine. But what I like is having a little bit brighter, and then having the small. I reduce the range to nothing, and then I come to the light source itself and click on those, and I feel like that ends up giving the light source a much more a better definition. Like that's what's lit, and then I have some light that's a lower intensity that's like around it being cast by it. And so you can see kind of here, if we add some heavy range of light, you can see that it goes through any of the open portals automatically, which is really nice. And then when we've placed our light, then we can go to the environment and we can turn down the darkness, right? Or turn down the light, so we can kind of see this is how people might do like night version maps. It's very easy to go from light to dark. And then this will also show you all your coverage and all your lights, and that gives you an idea. Did I light my rooms, and did I light my map correctly? Does it look right? Does it feel right? Do the hallways look lit? Are rooms that aren't lit, illuminated at all, like they shouldn't be, right? It helps answer questions for you, just as a check. Even if you have no intention of doing a night map, I find it's an easy way to like check your work and make sure that you're doing it the right way. So that's light sources and how they work. It's pretty straightforward. I also use point light a lot to make effects for things. So for example, I might be making like let's say I'm making a blacksmith or an armorer or something, and I've got a table for him, right? I've got this table, and on his table he's got some sword he's working on. So we'll shrink that down and put that on top. Okay, and maybe I want to implicate that this is like a magic sword that he's working on. So I may change the range to not 0.5 the lowest, intensity not very high, because I'm going to put a bunch. And then even though I'm not designating this, not meaning this to be a source of light, even though it would be potentially, but I put a bunch of these little light objects along the blade. So I'm clicking my button a bunch of times. If you hit select tool, you'll see I put down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 little lights on the sword. But at the end of the day, then we get like this sword that looks like it's glowing blue. I can make it whatever color I want. And then also when we change the environment, we'll see that it has like a slight blue glow to it, which you can do to any object to give it whatever feel you want. And which is incidentally how I accomplish effects like in this Mind Flayer map that I made, where it's very dark and it has a lot of glowiness to it. So lighting was a huge factor. And so I used a lot of light on objects to get the effects that I wanted, right? So I had like this path tool, but I had, I have a whole bunch of lights going along it to illuminate it. But then in certain places, you'll see there's like a heavy focus of light. And I did that in this case to implicate, like this was a fiber going along the exterior of their layer that I thought, any Mind Flayer could like reach out to and touch, and it would communicate back to the elder brain or something like that. And so these are like thought signals that are moving through this fiber. So it's lit a little bit along the whole periphery, but then there's like these little pulses, like these are thoughts running through the area. So that's a way that you can use light to do a bunch of different things and create effects like magic portals or glowing water or glowing mushrooms or things of that nature, where it's not so literal like this is a torch and this is a lantern, but this is a thing that either is emanating light and I want to represent that, or I want to use the lighting as like a paintbrush and make it, achieve an effect that creates a mood or informs the viewer of something in that way. So I know we're an hour and 40 minutes in, so I want to make sure we cover kind of everything people are wanting to see. Is there anything I have not covered that you get hung up on or have questions about or want to know how to do because it's relevant to your work?
I was going back to the, like when you made that well and you made
Yeah.
it 2 or 3 different layers.
Yeah.
Have you ever found, and I don't know if you can you change all of that then to just move that all just to one layer?
Yes. So I'll
And
show you. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
and then that helps with stacking later in case, like I said, you're only, I suppose not limited, but if you need to put that above or below something else, but you've already used layers 1 through 4 to build it, then you're kind of stuck with, then the path gets stuck under it in the middle of it.
Yeah. So let's see. I got rid of the one. So let's rebuild that one really quickly of like the table. Um, I don't think that works as well with objects. So let's try it real quick. So let's do like layer 2. Let's like a few different layers. So let's grab, I guess it really doesn't matter what we have on here. But let's do layer 3 as the tablecloth. We'll go up to the top. Layer 4 is the candle. And we'll do maybe layer 1 just to have that. Will be some chairs. Layer 1. Put some in here. All right, so here we have this swiftly, weirdly dimensioned table with a gigantic candelabra and a tiny little tablecloth. But if we highlight all this, I suspect if I change this to level 1, I don't think, it's going to condense everything down, and maybe because I placed the chairs as over in layer 1, it remembered that and did that. But I think it's not going to work in the same way that it will in other tools. So in objects, I don't think it's going to work that way. With objects, I think you're going to need to be a little more purposeful in your original placement of things and make sure you're leaving layers for yourself. As a general rule, to help myself, I generally say if it's laying on the ground, I should make it layer 1. But if it's underneath something, like if I can't easily or wouldn't readily pick it up, so things like carpets, right, should probably be layer 1 because they're going to be under things. All furniture, if it's furniture, like a piece of furniture that I would pick up and move, a bed, a end table, a desk, a chest, something like that, a barrel, a crate, I will make almost all of those layer 2 just off the bat. Even if there's nothing else in the room yet, no carpets or anything, I will make those layer 2. If it lives on something, it's papers, it's a tablecloth, it's the candelabra, it's something, then I might make those layer 3. Now, I do a lot of it, so I might, if I know what I'm making, and I only need to make it once, then I'd be comfortable making everything in one layer and just doing it incrementally the right way. But to save yourself some heartache that I had to go through a couple of times to teach myself not to do it that way, I would learn to utilize the layers in a more intelligent way out of the gate. Now, the thing you're describing does work with pathing tools. So one thing that I have done in the past is, so let's say we got layer 1, we got a pathing tool, we're making cliffs. So I draw some cliff, and then I scale it up. I do layer 2, and I draw some more really big cliff. That was too big. Okay, that's good. It's going to bother me. All right, so slightly bigger. Okay, that looks nicer. Okay, so we're at layer 2. Then I make layer 3, and I draw some more cliffs, and it's looking good. And then I do layer 4, and I draw some more cliffs. All right, perfect. Okay, and now I want there to be a waterfall, and I want the water to cascade over the cliffs down into this pool that's at the bottom. But crap, water is water layer. All of the cliffs are various layers. So I could select all my cliffs, and then I should be able to change those all to below water. And now my water will come over. And then I can go and pick like some of these rippling objects and what, like something like this, change the color to like a white. Put this, say, on the bottom here, and then make a, I don't know, get something like this. And then kind of like put a few of these like up here, something like that. And then maybe put some more water on top. Maybe there's like a river or something like that feeds into this. So in that way, with these cliffs or whatnot, that technique works, where I can layer them multiple layers as I'm stacking them and putting them together. And then once I have them all there, then I can change and flatten them all back down to a new layer. and in this case, like underwater, so that I can have like a waterfall going down under it. But for regular objects, that will not be a tried and true thing that you can just depend on.
Plan ahead a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, it helps. I mean, you'll learn. That's how I had to learn, just trial and error. You spend a long time making some really intricate thing, only to find out that you layered yourself into a corner, so to speak, and now have to like redo the whole thing. And now you have to spend another like 10 minutes doing something. It's just, you don't want to have to do that. Any other questions?
So all the assets come in these asset packs, right?
So like every asset you see here on the right hand side, like as I'm scrolling, still scrolling. Everything that you've been seeing, still scrolling. Everything up to here, everything that you just saw, it all comes just default in the Dungeondraft program. You don't have to go out and get any extra assets.
Oh no, I get it, but like extra assets are all in packs. Like I can't import like PNGs or stuff like that.
Yeah, well, the only way you'd be able to do it would be like what I showed you earlier, where I like have an asset that's recorded in this way, this copy and paste code, and then I just copy the code and then just paste it back into my Dungeondraft session.
Okay, yeah,
like that would work. I don't know of other ways. Like if I have, I don't know, some collection of PNGs, can I import just a random PNG as an asset? I don't think so. I think they have to be in those packages. But that starts to bleed over into a whole area of the program and making the packs and converting things that I just don't have any expertise in.
Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah.
Just wondering.
I've never made them, so it's been described to me that you can. If I wanted to take this, what I guess the process that I understand you would do is you would put them in a window. Well, actually, probably let's see, you'd probably make it like, I don't know, smaller. I don't even know how to spell tiles if you have to do that. Anyway, I would put it. You'd put it in here. You'd go and change the terrain to. You'd click off. And you turn grid off, and then you would export this as a PNG, and then I guess adjust whatever level you would want for the pixels, and then you'd export that and you'd save that as well object or something, and then I think from there you can take that PNG and then wrap that up in a zipped file, and then I think you just rename that zip file like pack file or something.
Yeah, I'm sure you can like Google it.
Yeah,
explanation on Reddit, whatever.
Some helpful person, I'm sure, has created a YouTube video for it to do exactly that.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the first person who has like a PNG and was like, well, if only I could put this in.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure that's the case. Anything else that people would want to know about getting started or workflows or that kind of stuff?
When you save the maps, I saw that you have like the export as the 3 different options, but when you save it to later be reopened in Dungeondraft, is that a different thing entirely?
Yes. So those are these like Dungeondraft files.
Okay.
Yep. And they're very small. So yeah, when you just click the save button, so if I went to, I don't know, this guy and just click save, it will take you out to wherever, and it'll be a map, Dungeondraft_map file, and you'll just give it a name. And that's what you'll be loading and unloading. And that will be, the source file. So if you gave that file to someone else with Dungeondraft, they can go in and they can make all the changes they want, and they can, have it. They would have it just like I have it here. However, any saved version you make on a PNG or a JPEG or whatever, obviously they can't make any changes. It's just a static image. Okay, well, it sounds like, I mean, if there's more questions, please feel free to ask. If not, if you do not have Dungeon Draft and would like it, just because I love it, I think it's a great program. I know sometimes people, I see them post, like, I would love to use Dungeon Draft, but I'm looking for free software or something. I'm actually giving away 5 copies, just out of the kindness of my heart, to people who want to begin using it, because I think it's a great program. So if you don't have Dungeon Draft right now and would like it, feel free to just say, I don't have Dungeon Draft in the chat, and I will enter you into that drawing. And if you win, then I will maybe put your email address. Then I can send an email to you and get you set up, and I'll gift you one. Otherwise, I thank everybody for coming, and I appreciate your time. It's a good amount of time. Hopefully, you learned something about it and feel better about the environment and whether it'll be for what you want, and if it would achieve the maps that you would want. I have really enjoyed Dungeon Draft from the aspect of it being a very flexible, free, kind of open environment that lets me work the way I think, and it also removes a lot of the frustrations that I have in other softwares. I feel other software is difficult. It makes me place like a bunch of wall objects, or it makes me do certain minutia that I just would drive me crazy and would stunt my creative process. Dungeon Draft certainly isn't perfect, but I feel like from a creation aspect, the coloring, the flooring, the walls, the flow of everything, the ease of creating caves or buildings or terrain really lets me make whatever I want. And there's a lot of variance. There could be more in the terrains, but it's a really great program. It's gotten very stable. They develop very frequently in releasing new packages with more assets or more features. So I've been very pleased with it. I also have absolutely no connection with Dungeon Draft or Megasploot or that business. I'm just a happy user, and it's done well for me, and just want to kind of share the goodness on with other people.
Thank you a ton for doing this. This has been really cool to learn a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate all your guys' time, and I hope that A, that you get it, and B, that it's able to help you, because you can make some really awesome maps very quickly. It'll cut down on prep a ton of time, and it's a great program. So again, I appreciate everybody's time. If you have questions in the future, feel free to just send them along. I'm happy to answer questions or help where I can. Otherwise, I guess I'll just see you out there in the D&D role-playing tabletop map making world.
Thank you.
You bet. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.